Hello, my friends. Before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so we can see how far these stories travel. And don't forget to subscribe with notifications on so YouTube keeps bringing you more chilling stories like these. The air in Havenwood always smells like pine needles and the faint, sweet decay of last season's apples. But tonight, mixed into it was something metallic, something wrong. I'm standing on the porch of the only gas station for 30 miles, the Havenwood Quick Stop, the glow of its yellow, open, sign barely reaching the fog clinging to the highway. It's 1:47 a.m. The town, if you can even call this cluster of two streets a town, is dead. Has been since the cannery shut down 5 years ago. My shift should have ended an hour ago, but the owner, Mr. Silas, is always late. Always. I flicked the cigarette butt onto the damp asphalt and watched the little ember hiss out. Patience, Jack, I muttered to myself, though patience was the one thing I was running out of. I needed the money, sure, but more than that, I needed to know what that smell was. It wasn't just metallic, it was coppery. I pulled my threadbare flannel tighter. The cold here doesn't just bite, it gets inside your bones and sets up camp. Every sound is amplified at night. The distant hoot of an owl, the grinding groan of the old town water tower expanding in the chill, the frantic drumming of my own heart whenever a shadow moved too fast. A pickup truck finally rumbled into the lot, its headlights cutting twin cones through the mist. It was old, a Ford F-150, but too clean for anyone local. The paint was a deep forest green, recently waxed, and it was driving way too slow. It pulled up not to the pump but to the shadowy side of the building, right where the dumpster sits. My stomach twisted. Locals never park there, never. I flattened myself against the wall, trying to see the driver. The interior light didn't come on when the door opened. A tall figure, all shoulders and bulk, emerged. They were wearing dark work clothes and a thick beanie pulled low over their face. Not Mr. Silas. Definitely not. The figure reached into the truck bed, and I heard the unmistakable scrape of metal on metal. A shovel. What the hell was someone doing with a shovel at a gas station at 2 in the morning? I slid my hand into my back pocket, feeling the cold, smooth grip of the cheap utility knife I kept for opening boxes. Pathetic, I know, but it was all I had. He or she was moving fast now, purposeful. They weren't looking around. They were focused on the dumpster. They reached in and started pulling out bags, not trash bags. These were heavy-duty industrial-grade plastic sacks, the kind farmers use for fertilizer. But they weren't white. They were a murky, translucent gray, and they looked wet. As the figure wrestled the first bag free, it brushed against the sharp edge of the dumpster lid. Rip! A sound like tearing flesh, followed by a heavy thump on the pavement. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't move. I could only stare at the spot where the bag had fallen, a dark, viscous stain already spreading out beneath it. The figure froze, head snapping up, but not toward me. They were listening to the highway, checking for traffic. They didn't see me yet. The small tear in the plastic bag was maybe an inch long, and through it I saw it. Not an apple, not old oil. A perfect, sickening glimpse of something pale, oddly smooth and curving. It looked like a ceramic doll's arm, but no, it was a shoulder. And around the pale curve, something dark was clinging like wet silk. Hair. The air rushed out of my lungs. It wasn't the metallic smell I noticed now. It was the sharp, undeniable odor of iron and formaldehyde, masked poorly by the pine. This wasn't some late-night dumping of construction waste. This was a cover-up, and the man hauling the bags was now staring right at the gas station window, his silhouette huge and menacing against the mist. He hadn't seen me, just the reflection of the open sign. He quickly knelt, his hands fumbling to gather the spilled contents back into the torn bag. What do I do? Run inside, lock the door. The phone line's been unreliable for weeks, and the nearest sheriff's office is 45 minutes away, a lifetime in this fog. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. If I ran, he'd hear me. If I stayed and he saw me. He finally wrestled the torn bag back into the truck, slamming the tailgate with a deafening crash. The sound echoed off the silent houses lining Main Street. He got back in the truck, its engine rumbling to life. I held my breath, every muscle screaming at me to move. The headlights swung past my hiding spot, blinding me for a fraction of a second, before turning onto the highway and disappearing into the white fog. I waited a full minute, utility knife digging into my palm before I dared to move. I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. The spill, I had to see the spill. I walked over, my eyes glued to the dark, spreading stain. It wasn't huge, but it was thick, glistening under the weak light. Right in the middle of the stain, a small, dark object lay half submerged. I knelt, ignoring the voice in my head screaming about fingerprints and contamination. I used the tip of my knife to carefully nudge the object. It was a button, a small white pearlized button, the kind you'd find on a child's sweater or a vintage cardigan. A cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't some random body. This person. They had been somebody's child, somebody's friend, someone who wore a sweater with a pearl button, and they were now nothing more than cargo being moved in the dead of night. I stood up, the button now heavy and cold in my own sweaty palm. I looked across the lot, past the fog line, toward the silent black woods that surround Havenwood. The truck had gone that way, west, toward the Whispering Pines Reservoir, a man-made lake deep enough to bury secrets forever. I glanced at the clock inside the station, 2 a.m. I had evidence. I had a name for the town's awful smell. But I also knew something dangerous, something that the town or someone in it had desperately tried to make disappear. Should I call the sheriff now and risk the driver circling back? I looked at my truck, a beat-up Ford Ranger. I could follow him. If I didn't follow him, if I didn't see where he was going, this button would be the end of the story. I'd call the police and they'd find a spot on the pavement and an unreliable witness. No body, no crime, just fog and fear. But if I followed him, I'd be alone on a back road, chasing a killer who had already shown he was willing to dispose of a human life like it was yesterday's trash. A faint, high-pitched whirring sound started up from the north end of the town, near the old grain silos. It was the sound of a drone, a surveillance drone. Was the killer checking the perimeter? Or was someone else watching the gas station right now, too? I looked down at the button, then out at the black highway disappearing into the white. The choice felt final: run or hunt. I made my decision. I stuffed the button deep into my pocket, grabbed my keys, and started walking toward my Ranger. The whirring sound was getting closer. I didn't have much time. I had to see where that green truck was going. I started my engine, the sound loud and defiant in the absolute silence of the small town night. I pulled onto the road, the gas station sign shrinking in my rearview mirror. As I sped west, the fog became a suffocating shroud. I realized the truck hadn't left any light on the road, no tail lights. He was driving dark, and then I saw it, not on the road but off to the right, hidden behind a clump of cedar trees, a faint, pulsing red light. The brake lights of the F-150. He wasn't going to the reservoir. He was pulled off on an unmarked dirt track leading into the deepest part of the forest, the part they call the backwoods. I slammed on my brakes, the tires spitting gravel. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I'd caught up to him too fast. He was still there. The sound of the drone was directly overhead now, a buzzing mosquito in the black night. I killed my headlights and coasted the Ranger into the shadow of a giant oak. I got out, the cold instantly soaking through my jeans. I stood at the edge of the asphalt, peering into the blackness of the dirt track. I could no longer hear the truck's engine, just silence. Did he hear me? Did he see my lights flash when I stopped? I took one step onto the dirt, then another. The smell of copper was overwhelming now, mingling with the damp earth. The ground here was soft, like fresh-tilled soil. I stopped dead, not soft from rain, disturbed. I dropped to my knees, feeling the earth. It was loose, and it wasn't just on the track. It was a wide patch, maybe 10 feet across, right at the mouth of the trail. My hands scraped against something hard beneath the layer of loose dirt. I felt around, my heart pounding so hard I thought the killer, wherever he was, must surely hear it. It was a piece of vinyl, thick, tough, dark green like a tarp, and it was covering something huge, something flat. This wasn't where he was taking the body. This was where he had dug it up. The truck had been picking up the harvest, not dumping it. The body had been here, hidden beneath the tarp in the fresh earth, maybe for days, waiting for the cover of fog in the darkest hour. I stood up, backing away slowly, my eyes darting into the woods. If he was here, he was close. If he had just picked up something or someone, he wouldn't leave his supplies. I took one last look at the disturbance in the dirt. Then, my eyes caught something else. A flash of reflective orange just inside the tree line, 20 feet from the disturbed earth. It was a survey flag, a tiny, insignificant orange flag stuck into the ground. Why would someone flag a grave? I crept toward it, moving silently, my breath held tight. When I reached it, I noticed there were 2 more flags placed in a precise, neat triangle around a massive, ancient hemlock tree. They weren't just random markers. They were indicating a boundary. I looked up at the hemlock. It was scarred, struck by lightning years ago, its trunk split. It was huge. Then I realized what the flags meant. They weren't marking where the body was. They were marking the spot before the digging started. They were part of a plan. A twig snapped, loud as a gunshot, from the deep shadows to my left. I froze. My lungs were burning. I couldn't tell if the sound was an animal or the killer. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the rough bark of the hemlock. I had to hide. I pressed myself against the lightning-scarred trunk, trying to melt into the shadow. My heart was a drum machine going haywire. I looked down, and right at the base of the tree, half buried in the moss, was a small, engraved silver locket. It was open, and inside 2 tiny black and white photos of 2 kids smiling. They looked so familiar, too familiar. The locket's reflection caught the faint ambient light, and I saw a small, engraved initial on the back. S. Silas, Mr. Silas, the owner of the Quick Stop. My boss. The piece snapped into place. The late-night shifts, his constant, worried phone calls to a contractor. The sudden, unexplained trips out of town. He wasn't late tonight, he was waiting. The truck hadn't driven away. It had been waiting on the road, watching. I was the one who had driven past it. My blood turned to ice. He hadn't been watching the gas station reflection. He'd been watching the road for me. I heard the sound again, closer this time. A heavy boot crunching on pine needles. The sound was coming from behind the tree. I knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that the killer wasn't looking for me now. He had been waiting for me to leave the station. He had been waiting for me to find the spill. He had been waiting for me to follow the truck. I was exactly where he wanted me. I gripped the utility knife, my knuckles white, the locket digging into my palm. I was trapped between the scarred hemlock, the open, loose ground, and the black, silent woods. A whisper, low and gravelly, came from just beyond the trunk. "You should have just waited for your paycheck, Jack." The footsteps started moving, circling the tree. He knew my name, he knew everything. I had maybe 3 seconds before he came into view. I had followed a dead body into a killer's trap, and my simple night shift was about to become my last. What was the thing I was forgetting? The one detail that could save me. My eyes darted up, catching a brief, bright flash against the black sky. It was the drone, turning, now flying directly overhead, its camera fixed on the hemlock. Click, click, click. It wasn't Mr. Silas's surveillance. It was someone else's. And now, whoever owned that drone knew exactly where I was and who was hunting me. I took a deep breath, clutching the locket, my only leverage. I had to move, and fast. I took the button, pressed it hard into the soft, loose earth beneath the tree, and then I hurled the locket in the opposite direction, toward the loudest part of the underbrush. "I know what you dug up, Silas, and the camera saw it all," I shouted before dropping into the disturbed earth, scrambling to hide myself in the very place he had been trying to conceal. I heard the man's bellow of rage and the rapid, crashing steps heading away from me, toward the sound of the locket. I pulled the tarp over my head, burying myself in the dirt, the smell of copper and rot instantly surrounding me. I was shaking, praying that the diversion would last long enough, and that whoever was flying that drone was a friend, not another enemy. I lay there, listening to the frantic, muffled sounds of the man searching the woods for the locket, searching for the face from the camera. The silence, after he stopped moving, was the worst sound of all. Where did he go? Was he still out there, listening for my breath, or had he fallen for the trick? The dirt was cold, heavy, and I felt something hard and sharp press against my cheek. I turned my head just enough to see it, the corner of a small, wooden crate, half buried in the freshly turned soil. The crate had a single word stenciled on its side, the paint faded but still legible: LABS. This wasn't just a burial. This was an operation, and the body was just one part of a much bigger, much darker secret hidden in the heart of Havenwood. I closed my eyes, the cold penetrating my bones. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. But which way? Out into the woods to face the killer, or back to the road and my truck, which he had surely seen? And who really was flying that drone? The next move had to be perfect, or I was just another ghost in the backwoods. The first thing you notice about Red Creek isn't the cold, or the isolation, or even the crippling quiet. It's the color of the river, running a deep, unnatural rust red, even in the dead of winter. It looks like diluted blood. My name is Elias, and I'm parked on the shoulder of Route 9, 3 miles outside town, watching the fog swallow the last rays of sunset. I'm a surveyor, or I was, until the company folded last month. Now I'm just a guy in a battered sedan, driving across the country to a job that hasn't officially started, using the last of my savings to stay in the cheapest motel I could find, which happens to be here, in Red Creek. The air is already frozen, stinging my lungs when I breathe. I'm huddled under a thermal blanket trying to recharge my phone, but the signal here is a joke. One bar flickering. I got out of the car, stretching my cramped legs. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a loud sound. It was more like a rupture in the silence. A high-pitched, thin whine like feedback from a cheap microphone. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then cut off, leaving the vacuum of the small-town night even thicker than before. I shivered, pulling my wool hat down. Just wind, maybe. Some electrical fault. I got back in the car and finally rolled into Red Creek. It was maybe 50 buildings clustered around the Red Creek diner and the defunct sawmill. Every house was dark. Every window a blank black square. Not just sleeping dark, but abandoned dark. It felt like I'd driven into a photograph taken 10 years ago. The only building with a light was the Red Creek Inn. A single, buzzing fluorescent tube above the lobby door. I checked in with a woman whose name tag read Mabel. She was ancient, her face a road map of deep lines, her eyes milky and dull. She didn't look up when I spoke. "Room 3, she rasped, handing me a heavy brass key attached to a block of wood. "No heat after midnight. Don't touch the windows and—" She paused, lifting her chin just enough for her pale eyes to fix on mine. The sudden contact was startling. "Don't go outside after 11. The air is bad for you." The air? I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "The whole town seems pretty closed up, Mabel." "They're smart," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The quiet comes and the quiet changes things." I nodded, pretending I understood, and hauled my bag up the creaking stairs. Room 3 was exactly as advertised. Cramped, smelling of dust and stale cigar smoke. I tossed my bag on the worn quilt and looked out the single window. It faced the back alley, a narrow chute between my motel and the huge, dark hulk of the abandoned sawmill. The hour hand hit 10:30 p.m. I was starving, but the diner was dark. I pulled out a bag of stale chips and tried to focus on an old paperback. Then the sound came back. This time it was louder, closer. It wasn't a whine. It was a single, long, pure tone, like a tuning fork struck right next to my ear. It didn't hurt, but it vibrated, in my teeth, in my skull, in the hollow space between my ribs. I dropped the book. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't moving through the air. It felt like it was moving through the material of the building, through my own flesh. This can't be natural. It stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. My heart was hammering. I checked my watch, 10:58 p.m., 2 minutes to Mabel's deadline. I needed to know what that was. My professional curiosity, mixed with sheer, primal fear, pushed me out of the room. I crept down the stairs, trying not to wake the old house. The lobby was pitch black. Mabel was gone. The outside air hit me like a physical blow. It was colder than before, maybe 20 degrees below freezing. I slipped around the back, toward the alley and the looming shadow of the sawmill. The alley was paved with old, cracked cobblestones. I was halfway down it when I saw it, a tiny, blinking red light, high up on the corrugated metal wall of the mill. It looked like a camera or a sensor. I got closer, squinting. It was definitely a piece of electronic gear, affixed high up, pointed directly at my motel window. But the light wasn't blinking. It was pulsing, slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. I reached out, resting my hand on the cold, rough metal of the mill wall, and that's when the tone hit for the third time. This time it wasn't just a sound. As the tone vibrated, the surface of the mill wall beneath my hand started to shudder. I felt the metal hum, a deep, powerful resonance that went right through my bones. I stumbled back, gasping. I looked up at the sensor. The pulsing red light was now flashing violently, matching the intensity of the tone. When the sound died, I could hear two new things. First, my own choked, ragged breath. Second, a sound I recognized instantly from my surveying days, the dry, brittle creak of lumber under immense stress. I looked up at the mill roof. The ancient, heavy wooden trusses that held the structure together were groaning. The sound was getting louder, faster. The building was reacting to the tone. Was the sound meant to damage the building? Why? Then I saw something move in the window of the mill's ground floor. A silhouette, brief and dark, framed by the dust-coated glass. Someone was inside. I pressed myself against the motel wall, the brick cold and unforgiving. I had to know what they were doing, but I didn't want to get any closer to that wall. I crept to the corner of the alley, peering out toward the street. I could see the whole town now, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Every single house on the street, every dark window I'd passed earlier, now had a single, faint orange glow inside. They weren't lights. They were the color of embers, or perhaps the safety lamps miners use. And then I saw the figures. They were moving from house to house, carrying small, dark objects. They were residents, but they walked slowly, with a weird, shuffling gait, their faces obscured by the darkness and the strange, amber light reflecting off their hands. And they were all heading toward the sawmill. I heard a click from behind me. I spun around. The door to my room, room 3, was open. And standing in the doorway was Mabel. She wasn't holding a lamp. She was holding a remote control. It was small, old, and it had a single, smooth red button on the top, the kind that would start or stop a device. Her eyes, no longer dull, were terrifyingly alert and focused. She smiled, a thin, stretching of dry lips that didn't reach her eyes. "You should have listened, Elias," she whispered. "The air is bad after the quiet, it's what brings them out." She was talking about the tone, the vibration. It wasn't the town closing up. The people were waiting, and the sound was their signal. She raised the remote. My mind screamed with sudden realization. The buzzing fluorescent light in the lobby. The pulsing red sensor. They weren't faults, they were markers. Before I could move, Mabel pressed the red button. The town plunged into absolute total silence. No electrical hum, no sound of the mill groaning, not even the sound of the wind. But this new silence wasn't a relief. It was a suffocating pressure. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the world, leaving me in a vacuum. I looked at the sawmill. The line of shuffling, silent figures was now entering the main doors. And then I felt the cold grip of Mabel's ancient, surprisingly strong hand clamp down on my arm, dragging me back toward the black, empty lobby. "We have to get you inside, Elias, before they start to listen for you." What were they listening for? My heart beating, my panicked breath, and what were they doing in that mill? I struggled, but she was like iron. My foot kicked something on the floor, the wooden block with the brass key for room 3. It must have fallen when she opened the door. In that instant of wrestling, I noticed a tiny detail on the wooden block, something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just a number. Engraved beneath the 3 was a single word: monitor. This wasn't a motel room. It was a hiding spot, or maybe a trap. I wrenched free and bolted out onto the street, away from Mabel, away from the mill, running as hard as I could toward my car, toward the highway. As I ran, I heard it, faint but distinct, coming from the direction of the sawmill. Not the high-pitched tone, but a low, guttural whisper, magnified 1,000 times, rolling through the silent streets. It was my name. Elias. And I knew, with a certainty that froze me to the bone, that the moment I made it to my car and started the engine, the sound would return. And this time, it wouldn't be aimed at the mill. It would be aimed at me. I stopped running. If I used the car, I was dead. I had to go silent. I had to disappear into the blackness of Red Creek, and whatever the locals were doing in that mill, I had to find a way to escape before the sound found me. I turned and sprinted toward the darkest structure I could see, the roof of the Red Creek Inn, the place I had just run from. It was my only chance. As I scrambled up a rusty fire escape, I looked back. Mabel was standing perfectly still in the motel doorway, the faint orange light of the town's residents reflecting in her pale, empty eyes, and she was smiling. I reached the roof, heart pounding, lungs screaming. I looked over the silent, frozen town. In the distance, the single, red rust river glistened under the weak starlight, and I knew that this place wasn't just a physical trap, it was something psychological. They hadn't killed me yet. They were conditioning me, preparing me for the final sound. I looked at the mill one last time. The orange glow was gone, the doors were shut, the silence was absolute. But from the alley, a new, very quiet sound began. The rhythmic, dry click, click, click of the sensor on the mill wall. It was counting down to something. And I was the target. The rain in Oakhaven doesn't fall, it slides. It's thick, cold, and quiet, a gray curtain pulled tight over the entire valley. It's 3:30 a.m., and the only sound is the rhythmic drip, drip, drip from the busted gutter outside my window, a sound that has driven me to the edge of sanity since I got here. I'm holed up in the attic room of the Oakhaven boarding house, a skeletal wreck owned by a perpetually absent landlord. I came here 3 weeks ago, escaping. Well, that doesn't matter now. What matters is the quiet. It's a deceptive quiet. Underneath the rain, the whole town feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to crack. My name is Clara. I'm huddled under a pile of old, itchy blankets staring at the ceiling, where a new patch of damp is spreading, dark and circular like an eye. 3 nights ago, the local sheriff, an enormous man named Brody, knocked on my door. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked if I'd seen the driftwood. "It's just a shape, miss," he'd said, his voice a low rumble. maybe a shadow. Sometimes it moves along the riverbank after dark. But if you see it, you don't call me. You lock your doors, you turn out the lights, and you don't even breathe. I chalked it up to local legend, a way to scare outsiders. This town is full of that kind of manufactured dread. But tonight, the dread isn't manufactured. The heat went out an hour ago. The cold isn't the kind that you can shiver away. It's a deep, wet, seeping cold that tells you you're alone. I got up, pulling on a thick sweater. I needed the old kerosene lamp on the landing. As I stepped onto the threadbare carpet, I smelled it. A new scent. It wasn't pine or mildew. It was a sharp, metallic tang like old pennies, mixed with the overwhelming, earthy odor of wet rust. I froze. That scent wasn't coming from the leaky pipes. It was coming from below. I crept to the door and eased it open. The landing was black, save for the faint glow of the gaslight at the end of the street, filtered through the stairwell window. The smell of rust and rain was overpowering now. I took one slow, silent step down the creaking stairs. "Don't wake the house, Clara." I knew there was no one else in the house. The other rooms have been empty since I arrived. I know this because I check them every night. I check the locks. I check the windows. It's a habit born of necessity. I reached the first-floor landing. The rust scent was strongest near the kitchen door. The old kitchen, the one no one uses, where the back door to the alley is. I swallowed the knot in my throat. I couldn't just stand there. I had to know what was making that smell. My survival brain, the one that tells you the monster is real, was screaming. My rational brain was whispering something about a burst water heater. I tiptoed down the last 2 steps. I grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace mantel. Not much, but better than nothing. I pushed the kitchen door open, just a crack. It was black inside, but the pale, diffused light from the street gave a hint of shapes. The big porcelain sink, the butcher block, the old stove. And then I saw the floor. It was wet, but it wasn't just water. It was too thick, and under the faint light it had a dull, dark sheen. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The scent of rust was almost suffocating now. I stepped inside. The floorboards under my feet were soaked, squelching softly. I aimed the iron poker toward the light switch, flicked it. Nothing. The power was definitely out. I crept closer to the back door. The wetness was thicker here, almost pooling. I lowered the poker and ran my hand along the surface of the butcher block near the back door. My fingers came away slick. I brought them close to my face. The metallic, coppery smell was unmistakable. It wasn't rust. It was blood. And the rain hadn't stopped. It was heavier now, drumming an insistent rhythm against the back window. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to tear free from my ribs. Did someone break in? Was someone hurt? I looked at the back door. The 3 deadbolts I always engage were all undone. Someone had been here. Someone had been bleeding here. I heard a sudden sharp crack outside. It wasn't thunder. It sounded like metal hitting stone. I crouched, pressing myself against the counter. My breath hitched. Through the grimy glass of the back window, I could see the narrow, cobblestone alleyway, slick with rain and shadows. And there, leaning against the damp brick wall of the neighbor's shed, was a shovel. A long, dark silhouette against the street lamp's distant glow. And next to the shovel, a shape. It wasn't a shadow. It was tall, oddly thin, and completely motionless. It was the shape Sheriff Brody warned me about, the driftwood. It wasn't driftwood at all. It was a person, or something like a person, draped in what looked like heavy, dark canvas or oilskins. Their back was to me. They were completely still, seemingly staring at the wall. But then, as I watched, the figure slowly, mechanically, lifted one hand and reached out to the shed wall. It didn't touch it. It dragged its gloved fingers along the wet mortar, leaving a smear that was darker than the rain. Then they turned their head, slowly. The air in the kitchen went instantly cold, a shock that jolted me to my core. I couldn't see a face. Where a face should be, there was only a seamless stretch of dark, reflective material, like the surface of black, wet oil. And as the figure turned, I saw what they were carrying. It wasn't a weapon. It was a metal bucket. It looked like an old coal bucket, and it was dripping. Drip, 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 matching the broken gutter but closer, more deliberate. I could see the faint, dark stain where the bucket had been sitting on the kitchen floor. It wasn't just blood, it was a deposit. The figure turned its attention to the back door, the door I was hiding behind. They took one shuffling step, then another. The scraping sound of their wet shoes on the cobblestones was deafening in the silence. I backed up silently, my eyes glued to the dark outline of the door. The moment that thing touches the knob, I run. But they didn't touch the knob. They stopped right in front of the door, and then they started doing something else. They took the bucket and placed it gently on the top step outside. Then they reached into the folds of their canvas clothing and pulled out a small, clear vial. They uncorked the vial and began to pour its contents directly into the drain pipe leading from the roof to the ground, right next to the back door. It was a clear liquid, but as it mixed with the rain, a plume of acrid, chemical-smelling smoke briefly curled up into the night air. The figure paused, as if waiting for a reaction. I was fighting down a desperate cough. The chemical odor mixed with the copper of the blood was making my eyes water. What are they doing? Are they poisoning the water? The figure then slowly reached up, right to the keyhole of the back door, and placed something small and metallic over it. It looked like a cap or a plug. Then they reached down to the coal bucket, and I saw it. Inside the bucket wasn't anything horrible. It was gravel, wet, red-tinged gravel, and nestled amongst the stones was a single, perfect white rose. The figure reached into the bucket, took the rose, and carefully, meticulously, pressed it into the soft earth of the flower bed right next to the kitchen door. Then they took a handful of the bloody gravel and scattered it over the rose. They were marking the house, not just a warning but a deliberate, ritualistic act. As they straightened up, they tilted their heads slightly as if listening. And then they moved, not toward the kitchen door but toward the neighbor's shed. They picked up the shovel, hoisted it onto one shoulder and shuffled away, dissolving into the rain-slicked alley. I stood in the darkness, paralyzed, clutching the iron poker. He was gone. The silence rushed back in, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of the gutter and the pounding in my ears. I waited 5 minutes until the pounding subsided. Then I crept to the back door, slowly pulling back the deadbolts and chains I had left open. I threw the door open and stuck my head out. The rose was there, white, stark against the dark, bloodied earth. The gravel was shiny, wet, and undeniably stained. And the small metal plug was still over the keyhole. I reached out and yanked it off. It wasn't a simple plug. It was a tiny, intricately wired electronic component, a microphone, and it was coated in the same dark, slick, metallic substance I'd found on the kitchen floor. This wasn't just a break-in. This was a setup. The blood, the open locks, the mic over the keyhole. They wanted me to think something had happened inside so I would react. But why the ritual? Why the rose in the gravel? I looked up at the roof. The gutter was dripping, but now another sound, very faint, was coming from the broken gutter itself. I pressed my ear close to the cold metal pipe. It wasn't water. It was a very low, rhythmic clicking, like a tiny, muted metronome. And then a soft, dry whisper carried up the drain pipe from the darkness below. "You smell the rain, Clara." My own name, spoken right into my ear through the pipe. I stumbled back, dropping the microphone and the poker. He wasn't gone. He was down there, in the cistern or the sewer or the old root cellar connected to the drain. He had been listening to my every movement, my every breath, amplified through the pipes and the mic he'd placed on the door. And the clicking, that was him signaling. I backed away into the kitchen, my mind racing. The blood wasn't his. He put it there. It was a chemical lure, perhaps designed to attract something, or maybe it was to mask the smell of the vial's contents. I looked down at the puddle on the floor, now glistening ominously. I was standing in it. I had to get out. The attic room was too exposed. The front door was too open. I bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time, ignoring the creaking. I didn't grab my bag. I grabbed a can of dried beans from my cupboard, heavy, solid, and easily thrown. My only weapon. I reached the landing. I had one desperate idea. The trapdoor. There was a small, dusty, rarely used trapdoor in the ceiling, leading to a tiny, unfinished crawlspace above the attic. I pushed a chair under it, climbed up, and threw my shoulder against the plywood panel. It opened with a scrape of dry wood. I scrambled up, pulling the chair out and then pulling the trapdoor shut over my head. I was sealed into a cramped, dusty space between the rafters and the roof boards. I could hear the rain above me, a constant, soothing white noise, but below I could hear him. A slow, deliberate climbing sound, not the stairs. It was too muffled. He was climbing the outside of the house. The driftwood was coming for me, using the gutters, climbing the rain-slicked exterior walls. I pressed my cheek against the cold, gritty wood of the roof. Through a tiny gap where the roof met the wall, I could see the silhouette of the old boarding house chimney. And slowly, carefully, the black, oilskin-covered hand of the driftwood appeared, grabbing the edge of the roof, right next to the chimney. He wasn't using the gutter to listen. He was using it to climb. He pulled himself up, silent and smooth, until he was kneeling on the roof, just a few feet away from my hiding spot. I could smell the chemical odor from the vial, faint but definite, drifting through the gap. He was waiting. He knew I was under the roof. The microphone on the door had given him the confirmation he needed, the sound of the footsteps running up. He began to tap his hand on the wet shingles. Tap, 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 a slow, rhythmic beat. And then a new sound from below the house, from the ground. A low, mournful howl. Not an animal, something distorted, something human. The howling started to spread, house by house, traveling up the street. The entire town of Oakhaven was waking up. The tapping on the roof stopped. The driftwood was listening to the chorus of fear he had conjured. I looked at the can of beans in my hand. I had to break the pattern. I had to make a noise that wasn't panic. I took a shaky breath, pulled my arm back, and hurled the can of beans as hard as I could against the nearest surface, the thin, dusty attic wall right next to the trap door. Crash! The sound echoed through the silent house. It was loud, sudden, and jarring. The immediate effect was not what I expected. The driftwood didn't move. But the howling from the street stopped, instantly. Then from the spot where the driftwood was kneeling, a low, wet chuckle, a sound that was neither male nor female, but chillingly intimate. He tapped the roof once more, directly over the trap door, a final, deliberate signal. Tap. Then he stood up and began to walk away, his heavy, shuffling steps moving across the wet shingles, away from the trap door, toward the far end of the roof. I lay in the dark, silent attic space, my heart hammering against the rafters. He hadn't left. He was just waiting for me to come out. I had made my move. He had countered it. And now the rest of Oakhaven was awake, listening to the silence, waiting for the next sound to emerge from the boarding house. My next move had to be perfect, or I was dead. The town of Hollow Ridge isn't named for the landscape. It's named for the people. Everyone here is hollowed out, carrying a secret burden or a decade-old lie. And the biggest lie of all is that the town is quiet. It's not. It's just muted. My name is Finn, and I never should have come back. I'm standing in the bell tower of the old, abandoned St. Jude's Church. It's the tallest point in town, and from here, I can see every flickering porch light, every dead street, and crucially, the back window of Sheriff Grady's house. It's 1:17 a.m. The air smells like frost and stale incense. The only light source is my phone, its screen dimmed to the lowest setting, resting on a dusty sill next to a dead pigeon. I'm here because of a recording, a 2-minute, 12-second audio file sent to my burner phone an hour ago from an unknown number. The subject line: "They know where it is, Finn." The file is static written, clearly recorded in a moving car, but you can hear two voices: Sheriff Grady's, gruff and recognizable, and another, younger, panicked female. "Grady, got to be done before sunrise. The ground's too soft now, too risky." "Woman, but what about the box? We can't just leave the whole thing there." "Grady, the box stays. It's the only thing keeping the ledger in one piece. We take the ledger, we burn the box, and we blame the fire watch." "The ledger is what I'm after. It's the original account book detailing the money siphoned off the town's water utility fund for the last 20 years. Proof that Grady and his inner circle, the town council, have been stealing Hollow Ridge blind, a secret that forced me to leave 7 years ago. The box is what terrifies me. I know what they're talking about. The old copper strongbox that belonged to the town's first mayor, rumored to be hidden somewhere near the oldest part of the municipal boundary. And if the ledger is inside it, the box is my target too. I hear a faint metallic clink from below. The church door. Someone's here. My breath hitches. I dive behind the huge, decaying bell. The dust makes me want to cough, but I swallow it down, tasting grit and fear. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming up the winding stone staircase. They're too slow to be a kid, too loud to be a cautious civilian. I pull out the only tool I brought, a small, heavy-duty pry bar. The steps stop just below my landing. I hear a deep, rasping sigh. A flashlight beam slices through the darkness, sweeping across the stained glass windows, momentarily blinding me as it flashes over the bell tower opening. I squeeze my eyes shut, pressing myself flat against the cold stone. The beam moves away, focusing on the landing door. "I know you're here, Finn." Grady's voice, low and rough, echoes up the shaft. "You always did hide in the highest places. Think you can see everything from up here, don't you?" He knew. He wasn't just patrolling, he was waiting. The recording wasn't a leak, it was bait. How did he know I was listening? And who sent the message? I don't answer. Silence is my only shield. Grady chuckles, a dry, sickening sound. "Doesn't matter, I know what you're looking for, and it's not up there, it's where it always was." He starts back down the stairs, his footsteps retreating, the flashlight beam bobbing away into the darkness below. Is he really leaving, or is this a move to draw me out? I wait, rigid, until the final thud of the church door closing confirms his exit. I scramble to the window. Grady's patrol car is parked outside, but he's not getting in. He's walking across the street, toward the old Hollow Ridge Town Hall. The town hall is the core of the corruption. It's a 3-story Victorian monstrosity, mostly empty. But there's a legend. The original town charter and all historical artifacts were locked in the confessional room, a tiny, unused storage closet off the main lobby, only accessible by a single, cast-iron door. That door is my target. The copper strongbox must be in there. I slide down the bell tower ropes, my hands burning. I race out of the church and across the street, using the shadows cast by the leafless winter trees. I reach the town hall and press myself against the cold granite wall. The alley is narrow, littered with old newspapers and broken bottles. No cars, no movement, just the smell of wet garbage and a faint scent of gasoline. I spot the confessional room door. It's heavy, rusted, and has a padlock the size of my fist. I pull out the pry bar. It's not meant for this kind of lock, but I have to try. I slip the end into the shackle and lean into it, straining. My muscles burn, and the metal whines in protest. Creak. Not the lock. It was the town hall's front door, 30 feet away, opening with a slow, agonizing groan. I drop the pry bar and melt into the darkest recess of the alley. behind an enormous, overflowing recycling bin. The gasoline smell is suddenly stronger. I see him. It's not Grady. It's Councilman Vance, one of Grady's cronies, but he's not wearing a suit. He's wearing thick leather gloves and he's carrying a bright red gas can. He walks slowly, purposefully, straight toward the confessional room door. He gets to the cast iron door, surveys the lock, and then instead of opening it, he starts pouring the gas. He doesn't pour it on the lock. He pours it in a wide, thick line encircling the door. He's creating a ring of fire. My mind flashes back to the recording. Burn the box and we blame the Fire Watch. The Fire Watch is a local volunteer group, infamous for accidentally burning down a barn last year. Blaming them would be easy. Vance finishes the circle and walks back toward the front door, leaving a faint trail of gas behind him. He pulls out a cheap lighter, flicks it open. The tiny flame looks huge in the dead silence. He's going to light the fuse right at the front entrance, giving him time to escape while I'm trapped between a wall of fire and the town hall's granite back. I can't let him light it. If that ledger burns, the town is lost forever. I scramble out from behind the bin, my boots skidding on the wet cobblestones. Vance, stop! I shout, the sound tearing through the silent streets. Vance freezes, the lighter poised. His head snaps around, his eyes wide and panicked in the dark. He sees me. He sees the pry bar in my hand. He doesn't hesitate, he drops the lighter. It bounces once on the wet pavement, the tiny flame sputtering, then landing right on the trail of gasoline leading to the front door. Whump! A sheet of flame roars to life, licking up the front wall of the town hall. The fire spreads instantly, a blazing serpentine line now cutting me off from the only easy escape. Vance bolts, disappearing through the front door and into the burning town hall. He's heading for the only emergency exit on the side street, the one I can't reach now. I'm trapped in the alley, behind me a 10-foot brick wall, in front of me a semicircle of fast-moving fire closing in on the confessional room door. The metal of the padlock is already heating up, smelling of melting paint. The fire is too close to the door. I have seconds before the flames reach the seam and the whole room, with the copper box and the ledger inside, is consumed. I grab the pry bar and race toward the door, leaping through a small gap in the fire's ring, scorching my jeans. I start savagely hammering the padlock with the end of the bar. Clang, clang, clang. The metal shrieked in protest. The heat is unbearable. Smoke is starting to billow out from under the front door, thick and choking. One hinge of the padlock shackle bends, tearing metal with a high-pitched screech. I pull back the bar, shove the lock, and the shackle snaps free. I grab the iron handle and heave. The door doesn't budge. It's sealed by rust and disuse. I hammer the door itself, trying to break the seal. What am I missing? My eyes tear up from the smoke. I look down at the cast iron. The door is covered in ancient, ornate carvings, fleur-de-lis, crosses, and cryptic symbols. Wait, the handle, it's not a fixed handle, it's a wheel. A combination lock disguised as an ornamental wheel. I remember something from the town history lecture I hated in high school. The town hall was built by a secret society of Freemasons. The confessional room was their vault. The wheel has 4 marks. I have to turn it to the correct 4 symbols. I have no idea what they are. The fire is burning hotter now. I hear the sound of breaking glass from the main floor, the windows exploding from the heat. My time is up. I can feel the granite wall behind me starting to radiate heat. I grab the wheel, desperate. I turn it, clockwise, counterclockwise, hopping for a random click. Nothing. Think, Finn, what's the biggest lie in this town? The water utility money, 20 years. I look at the carvings again. There are 20 symbols on the wheel. I grab the wheel and spin it to the number 20. I try to turn the handle. It locks. I spin it to the year the corruption started, 1997. Nothing. I'm choking on the smoke. My lungs are screaming. I have one last shot before I pass out. I lean my head against the cold metal, closing my eyes. I hear the distant, wailing siren of a fire truck, probably called by a distant neighbor. Grady will be here soon. I have maybe 3 minutes. The woman's voice on the recording. They know where it is. I remember the name of the oldest family in Hollow Ridge, the ones who always ran the town council, the Sutter family. They'd been driven out by Grady's people. Their symbol was a weeping willow. I locate the symbol on the wheel. It's number 4. I turn the wheel slowly to the weeping willow. It clicks into place with a dry, soft thunk. Then I remember the other piece of the high school lecture. The Freemasons used the number 7 for their lock combination, representing completion. I spin the wheel past the willow to the symbol that's marked 7, a stylized crossed key. The handle clicks, it's open. I pull the heavy iron door open, the rust screaming a loud, final protest. Inside, the room is tiny, dark, and blessedly cool. In the center, on a pedestal, sits the copper strongbox. It's heavy and ancient, exactly as described. I lunge for it, grab the cold metal box, and turn to run. But the doorway is blocked. Standing in the smoke-filled opening, silhouetted by the roaring flames outside, is Sheriff Grady. He's not panicked. He's calm, his face smeared with soot, holding an old, dull machete. "Took you long enough, Finn," he says, his voice flat. "I knew you'd find the Sutter code. That's what smart people do." He takes a slow step into the room, blocking the exit entirely. "The recording wasn't bait for you to find the box," he continues, lifting the machete, letting the light of the fire glint off the blade. "It was bait for you to come to the fire, and now you're the fire watch." He was going to kill me, burn the town hall, and plant the murder weapon, making it look like I was the one who set the fire to destroy evidence before he arrived. I clutch the copper box to my chest. It's too heavy to throw. I have one option. I look past Grady into the room. There is one other door, a small wooden hatch built into the floor, clearly leading to an underground space. Grady lunges. I dodge, scrambling for the corner, kicking at a stack of loose papers. He swings the machete, embedding the blade deep into the wooden pedestal where the box was sitting, narrowly missing my head. The copper box feels heavy, impossibly heavy. It's not just a ledger inside, it's something else too. I reach the corner near the floor hatch. Grady is pulling the machete free, his eyes filled with a terrifying, cold rage. "It ends here, Finn," he snarls. I kick at the hatch with my foot, dislodging the rusted latch. The hatch creaks open, revealing a black, damp hole smelling of clay and mold, the confessional cellar. I drop the heavy copper box, letting it fall into the darkness. It lands with a heavy, satisfying crash below. Grady hesitates for a fraction of a second, his eyes glued to the hole where the evidence just went. That's all the time I need. I dive headfirst into the opening, scraping my arms and face on the splintered wood. I land hard on a pile of damp earth, the air knocked from my lungs. I hear the metallic, scraping sound of Grady throwing the machete down after me. I scramble deeper into the darkness, crawling through a low, narrow tunnel. I look back. Grady is framed in the hole above, a giant, terrifying silhouette. He starts to lower himself down. But I'm already moving, feeling my way through the pitch black. My hand brushes against something large and cold, the copper strongbox. I grab it and keep crawling. The tunnel is leading me away from the town hall, away from the roaring fire. The tunnel opens into a small, cylindrical space, a ladder. I start climbing desperately. I push open a manhole cover and emerge not onto a street, but into the absolute darkness of the Hollow Ridge Cemetery, right next to the oldest row of tombstones. I crawl out, the copper box clutched tight. The air here is clean, smelling of damp earth and old lilies. I hear the sirens now, close, loud, heading for the town hall. I turn back. The town hall is a raging inferno, lighting up the whole town. Grady is trapped down in that confined space now, perhaps choking on the smoke, or perhaps right behind me, finding his own way out. I open the copper box. Inside, beneath the ledger, is a small, heavy pistol. And I finally understand the recording. Grady wanted to destroy the ledger, yes, but he also needed to get rid of the evidence of the murder weapon he was going to use on me. I didn't just escape a murder plot. I took the proof of the entire conspiracy. I look at the fire, at the silent cemetery, at the gun in the box. I'm no longer the hunted. I'm holding the trigger to the destruction of Hollow Ridge. But the woman on the tape, the one who sent me the warning, who was she? And why did she risk everything to tell me the secret, only to set me up for an ambush? I close the box and disappear into the shadows of the cemetery, the copper box heavy and cold against my chest, waiting for the smoke to clear and the night to end. The danger isn't over. The town of Ember Glen is built entirely on a hillside, overlooking a basin where nothing grows but gray scrubgrass. It looks like the teeth of a dead animal. I've been here for 4 days, and I haven't seen a single child, a single dog, or a single smile. My name is Noah. I came here looking for my sister, Mia, who sent me a final, frantic voicemail 3 weeks ago. They watch the porch, Noah, the static. It knows when you leave. I'm renting a tiny, cramped cottage at the very top of the hill. It's midnight, and the only light comes from the moon, high and cold, casting the whole town in hard, black shadows. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the front door. I haven't been outside since 8 a.m. I have enough dried food for 2 more days. The cottage has a terrible smell, not mold, not dust, but a persistent scent of dry, burnt electronics. The static Mia mentioned is real. It's not just a bad radio signal. It's a low, constant hiss that seems to be coming from the very plaster of the walls. It's always there, a white noise so pervasive it starts to feel like the sound of my own thoughts failing. I picked up the landline phone, the only one that works, routed through some ancient hissing line. I put it to my ear. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Not a dial tone. The static, it was louder tonight, more demanding. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. I walked over to the back window, which overlooks a steep, overgrown patch of ground that drops away into the darkness. I squinted into the night. About 20 feet down the slope, something was glinting in the moonlight. I grabbed the heavy cast iron frying pan, my go-to weapon, and crept out the back door. The cold air was sharp and clean, cutting through the electronic stench of the house. I slid down the damp, muddy incline, using the scrubgrass for handholds. When I reached the object, I knelt down. It was a small, plastic bird feeder, but it wasn't birdseed inside. It was stuffed with wadded-up, crumpled strips of tinfoil. And tucked under the feeder was a small, coiled wire, leading back up the hill toward the house. I pulled on the wire. It was thin, almost invisible, but strong. I traced it back. It went under my cottage, feeding into the wall right beneath my bedroom window. The static, it knows when you leave. The tinfoil, the wire. This wasn't a bird feeder. It was a crude ground antenna, or perhaps a jamming device designed to funnel the static into the structure. Or maybe, to funnel something out. Suddenly, a loud, sharp crack split the air right above me. I threw myself flat, my face pressed into the wet dirt. I looked up. The kitchen light in my cottage had just shattered, exploded outward, raining glass onto the porch. They knew I was out. The static hadn't known I left. It had been their signal to look. And now they were sending a message. I scrambled back up the hill, terrified. I burst through the back door and slammed it shut, sliding the single deadbolt home. I ran into the kitchen, glass everywhere. But the most chilling thing was the frying pan, the pan I had just been holding. It was sitting on the table exactly where I had left it. Wait, no, I had taken the pan with me. I was holding the pan when I went outside. I looked down at my hands. They were empty, covered in mud. I turned slowly, looking back at the kitchen table. The cast iron pan was resting there, but it wasn't my pan. Mine had a smooth wooden handle. This one had a metal loop, and on the underside, scratched deep into the cast iron, were 3 letters, MIA. Mia's pan. Someone had been in the house. They had swapped my weapon for hers, leaving me defenseless outside. And they were playing a subtle, terrifying game. Are they here now? Are they still in the house? I snatched the pan, holding it tight. I crept through the cottage, checking every tiny, claustrophobic room. Empty. I got to the front window. It looked out over the main street, which curved sharply past the Ember Glen General Store before disappearing down the hill. The street was empty, too empty. But then I saw it. Just a quick movement at the edge of my periphery. A dark shape, not on the street but on the roof of the general store, perfectly still, flattened against the shingles. It was a figure, silhouetted against the moonlit basin. They were staring directly at my cottage. And as I watched, the figure slowly, deliberately, raised a hand and pointed one finger straight at my front door. A muffled, electronic thump sounded from the wall near the landline phone. I backed away from the window. They were not just watching. They were communicating with something inside the house. I ran to the wall. I put my ear to the cold plaster, right where the thump came from. The static was roaring now, a physical presence drilling into my eardrum. And underneath the hiss, something else. A pattern: beep, 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 beep. Morse code? No, it was too erratic. It sounded like an old computer modem trying to connect. I smashed the frying pan against the wall. Plaster dust exploded into the air, but the sound didn't stop. It just got louder. I started tearing at the wall with my bare hands, frantic. I ripped away the wallpaper, then the brittle plasterboard. Behind the wall was not insulation. It was a massive coil of thick, black wire, looped and tacked into the wooden studs, running from the floorboard straight up to the ceiling. A Faraday cage in reverse, designed to trap energy in or pull something down. And right in the center of the coil, pulsing with a faint blue light, was a small, flat electronic device, a transmitter. I yanked on the wires, tearing them free. The static stopped. The silence that followed was so profound it hurt. I stood in the middle of the room, dust motes dancing in the moonlight, hearing nothing but my own ragged breathing. Did I just cut off my only hope of contact, or their only source of surveillance? I looked at the transmitter. It was still pulsing. I brought the frying pan down on it, crushing the plastic casing with a sickening crunch. The blue light went dead. I looked out the window again. The figure on the roof of the general store was gone. The street was empty. I sank to the floor, leaning against the broken wall, trying to piece together the nightmare. Mia had been trapped in this static, this electronic web. They used the frying pan to show me they were here. But why? Why the theatrics? I looked at Mia's pan again. I turned it over, examining the crude Maya carving. As I ran my finger over the metal, I noticed a tiny, almost invisible seam on the handle. I pressed on it. Click. The handle popped open. It wasn't solid cast iron, it was hollow. Inside, tucked tightly, was a folded piece of yellowed paper. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. It was a note, written in Mia's frantic, recognizable script. Noah. They aren't watching the porch. They watch the static. It's not a jammer. It's a beacon. It's calling them. The general store, it's not a store. It's the source. The basement, get to the basement. Don't use the streets. Follow the lines. The static doesn't just know when you leave, Noah. It knows when you're afraid. Be silent. Be cold. The pan is the key. The metal loop handle, it's not a loop. It's a hook. A hook. I ran to the window again. The general store was dark, its windows boarded up. The note said the basement was the source, but how to get there without being seen? Follow the lines. I looked at the hillside. The entire town was laced with thick, ancient telephone and power lines, strung haphazardly from sagging wooden poles. And beneath the general store, the ground looked subtly different, a heavy black runoff stain, darker than the mud. It was the same burnt electronic smell. I looked at the pan handle. I slipped my finger through the metal loop. It was the perfect size. I ran into the bathroom, tore open the ceiling access panel, and climbed into the cramped space above the shower. The wooden rafters were thick with dust. I found what I was looking for immediately: the thick, rubber-coated main power line for the house, running along the ceiling beam. I took Mia's frying pan, flipped it over, and carefully hooked the metal loop handle over the main power line. My heart hammered. This was insane. I gently tugged. The power line held. It suddenly hit me. The houses here aren't built on the ground. They're built on the old, unused power infrastructure, like a giant, dangerous spiderweb of wires and conduits. The whole town is one giant electronic trap. I took a deep breath. I was going to use the power lines as my guide, perhaps even as a literal zip line, to move through the town unseen above the ground. I unbolted the bathroom window, climbed out onto the small, precarious ledge, and reached up to the power line above my head. I couldn't just walk on the wires. I needed to move below them, using the pan as a runner. I carefully transferred my weight to the wire, hanging by the frying pan handle. I started to slide, slowly, precariously, down the hill toward the general store. The cold wind whipped around me. Below, the houses of Ember Glen were silent, dark, and watchful. I heard a sudden, small pop from the house I had just left. The power was cutting out. They knew I was on the grid. And then another sound. A sound of slow, heavy grinding metal coming from the roof of the general store. I looked down. The grinding was getting closer. The figure on the roof wasn't just a watcher. They were operating something. And whatever it was starting to move along the wire towards me, its noise muffled by the height and the static-filled air. I was sliding toward the general store, and whatever was on its roof was sliding toward me. We were on a collision course, high above the silent, dark town. I pulled myself along the wire, faster now, the metal handle of Mia's pan squealing against the cold rubber. I reached the general store just as the grinding intensified, the shape of the machine now visible, a heavy, four-wheeled gantry moving along the power line cable. I jumped, releasing the pan and crashing onto the flat roof with a painful thud. The gantry screeched to a halt right where I landed. It wasn't manned. It was a remote-controlled cutting tool designed to sever the wire and send anyone on it plummeting to the ground. I scrambled away, running across the shingles. I kicked open the fire escape hatch and dropped into the black stairwell inside the general store. The scent of burnt electronics was overwhelming here, and beneath it a new smell: ozone. I ran down the stairs, deeper into the darkness. I reached the basement door and kicked it open. The basement was huge, lit by a single bare bulb buzzing weakly. It was filled with racks of equipment, computers, monitors, and massive, humming radio transmitters. Wires crisscrossed the ceiling like cobwebs. This was the electronic heart of Ember Glen. And in the center of the room, standing completely still, facing a bank of monitors, was Mia. But she wasn't looking at the screens. She was wearing a bulky, silver-lined headset, wires running from it directly into the largest transmitter. Her eyes were wide, vacant, and glazed over. She wasn't trapped by the static. She was generating it. She was the beacon. And standing next to her, wearing the same empty expression, was the woman whose face I hadn't been able to see on the roof. She was holding a small, black controller, the one that activated the cutting gantry. As I entered, Mia slowly raised her head, her lips barely moving. "The quiet, it changes things, Noah," she whispered, her voice distorted, amplified, and ringing with the static I'd heard in the walls. We're listening now. We're all listening. I looked at the monitors. They weren't displaying images. They were displaying brainwave scans of the town's residents. The fear, the silence, the isolation. It was all being measured, quantified, and controlled here. I had found my sister, but I had walked into the nerve center of a nightmare. And the only way out was to destroy the source of the sound, even if it meant destroying the part of my sister that was still in there. I raised the frying pan, the my carving facing my sister. The danger wasn't outside. It was here in the cold, humming heart of Ember Glen, and it was wearing my sister's face. The woman next to Mia smiled, a slow, chilling pull of her lips. She reached up and placed a hand on my sister's shoulder, and then, slowly, deliberately, she turned Mia's face toward me. The headset began to hiss, not static, but a loud, rising scream, and I knew I had seconds before the sonic assault crippled me. I took aim at the massive transmitter and swung the pan, praying the metal could break the machine before the sound broke me. The fight for my survival and my sister's soul was about to begin. Copper Sink isn't on any recent map. It's a mining community that died 50 years ago, leaving behind a network of crumbling wooden houses and, more importantly, a subterranean maze of old copper shafts and tunnels. My name is Lee, and I'm hiding in the deepest, blackest part of it. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was driving through the state, chasing a rumor about a forgotten mineral deposit, a geologist trying to make one last score. I stopped at the only functioning business within 100 miles, Jade's Bait and Supplies, a shack leaning against the highway like an exhausted drunk. That's where I saw the truck, a huge black military-style surplus vehicle idling in the dirt lot, its windows tinted opaque black, and the two men who emerged from it, not locals, too clean, too sharp, wearing matching, expensive hiking gear that didn't match the dirt roads. They weren't miners. They were looking for something precise. I pretended to buy chewing tobacco, but I was listening. They were asking Jade about the breach, a cave-in, and they mentioned a name, the Surveyor. I knew that name. It was the name of the man who sold me the coordinates for this forgotten mine. He disappeared 2 months ago. My gut seized up. I realized my presence here wasn't a coincidence. They weren't looking for copper. They were looking for me, or what I knew. I bolted out the back, dropped my sedan into a ravine where it wouldn't be seen from the highway, and ran. I ran straight into the mouth of the closest, darkest mine shaft, the one marked danger, unstable. That was 4 hours ago. It is now 2 a.m. I'm maybe 300 feet down, crouched in a small, damp pocket where a wooden support beam has rotted away. My only light is my headlamp, a weak, yellow circle on the rock face. The air is thick with the metallic scent of copper and the sickly sweet smell of rot. I killed the lamp a minute ago. I'm listening. In the absolute, suffocating darkness, sound becomes hyperreal. The dripping water is a drum beat. The creak of the ancient timbers is a whisper, and underneath it all, a subtle, rhythmic scrape on the stone floor. They're down here. They found the entrance. My pack is pathetic. 1 bottle of water, a half-eaten energy bar, a geological pickaxe, heavy but useful, and a crudely drawn map of the upper levels of the Copper Sink mine system. The scraping stops. A low, calm voice amplified by the tunnels echoes through the dark. It sounds impossibly close. Lee, we know you're here. We know you have the coordinates. You're shivering. We can hear your teeth chattering. I clamp my jaw shut, focusing on my breathing. It's a lie. The sound of their voice means they're not close enough to hear me shiver, but it's a terrifying, psychological move. They know my name. The Surveyor gave them everything. I can't stay here. I have to go deeper. I flick my headlamp on for a split second, just enough to confirm the direction of the secondary shaft. It's barely a crawl space, an old drainage conduit for groundwater heading down at a steep angle, too small for them to follow quickly. I slide into the conduit, pushing my pack ahead of me. The rough-hewn stone scrapes my knees and elbows. It's tight, terrifyingly tight. If the earth shifts, I'm buried alive. I slide down maybe 50 feet before the conduit widens into a small, vertical drop. A ladder, made of iron rungs bolted into the rock, descends into the blackness. I check the rungs, rusty but solid. I start climbing down, the cool, wet iron slippery under my gloved hands. I descend for what feels like an eternity. 10 minutes, 15. The air is getting warmer, heavier. That's bad. It means I'm approaching a sealed-off area, possibly where gas has collected. I drop onto a dirt floor. The headlamp beam shows a small chamber, maybe 8 feet wide. It's a dead end except for one thing, a faint, cool draft coming from a seam in the far wall. I drop my pack and grab the pickaxe. I chip away at the soft, shale rock around the seam. The stone is brittle here. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound is immense in the confined space. I hear a faint, distant shout from the shaft I just came down. They heard me. They know my general location. I have maybe 2 minutes before they get here. I smash at the wall, working like a madwoman. Suddenly, a large chunk of rock gives way. A rush of cold air hits my face, carrying a new scent, salt. The air is wet, sea-scented. Impossible. We're hundreds of miles inland. I widen the hole until I can squeeze through. I turn the headlamp to its dimmest setting and wriggle through the gap. I drop onto a floor of smooth, polished rock. I turn the lamp up just a little. I'm in a vast, natural cavern. The walls glisten with moisture, reflecting the light back, making the space feel endless. The salt smell is overwhelming. I look around. The cavern floor slopes down to a wide, perfectly still pool of water. It looks black, bottomless, reflecting the ceiling like a perfect mirror. And in the center of the pool, rising from the black surface, is a structure. A heavy, metal pylon about 10 feet tall, thick with rust and barnacles. Barnacles in a freshwater mine. I walk toward the pool, my boots silent on the smooth floor. The structure is unmistakably artificial, but ancient. It's covered in the kind of deep-sea life you'd find 50 miles off the coast. I reach the edge of the water. I put my hand down. It's not cold, it's lukewarm, and it tastes exactly like seawater. This mine isn't just copper. It was breached years ago, not by a cave-in, but by an underground ocean current, a pressurized stream of seawater, somehow driven miles inland by a fault line. And the structure in the middle, it's not a pylon, it's a submerged antenna. My geologist training screams at me. This isn't just a mine. It's an unprecedented scientific anomaly. And the coordinates I have aren't for a copper deposit. They're for the precise location of this geological freak of nature. I hear the sound of rock shifting behind me. They've found the hole. I turn off the lamp and scramble toward the far wall of the cavern, which disappears into the darkness. I need to get as far from the entrance as possible. I hear the two men drop heavily into the chamber. Their headlamps cut twin beams through the dark, sweeping across the water, across the strange antenna. "He's in here," the first voice, calm, cold, says. She's in here, turn on the array." The second voice is muffled, perhaps fumbling with equipment. "The power draw will be immense, sir. We risk exposure." "We risk nothing if we lose the data, Doctor. She knows what she's sitting on. Now activate it." A moment of silence. Then a sudden, deep hum starts, emanating from the pylon in the water. It's a low frequency, vibrating through the rock floor and up into my bones. The surface of the black pool begins to shimmer, not from vibration, but from light. The antenna is turning on. The water begins to glow a deep, unsettling blue. The light illuminates the entire cavern. I'm pressed tight against the rock face, but there's no place to hide. The cavern is enormous but perfectly exposed. The men see me instantly. "There, the wall, don't move, Lee." I bolt, running along the wall toward the far, dark end of the cavern. The hum from the water is intensifying. The light is blinding. And then the blue light is joined by a crimson pulse, throbbing with the hum. I look over my shoulder as I run. The two men are scrambling to get around the pool, drawing heavy black flashlights from their belts. Not flashlights, they're sleek, specialized weapons. I reach the far end. It's a dead end. Solid rock. I stop, cornered. The two men stop, 30 feet away, their weapons raised. "Drop the pack, Lee," the calm one commands. "The coordinates now." I look at the wall. My escape tunnel is gone. I'm trapped between two armed men and a pool of superheated, glowing seawater. Wait, the wall. Where the rock meets the floor, the shale is darker, wetted by the ocean current. I drop the pickaxe, grab my pack, and throw it into the water with a heavy splash. The men flinch, startled by the disruption. "The coordinates are in the pack," I shout, my voice cracking. "Go get them." They hesitate. They look at the glowing, ominous water. I use that microsecond. I snatch the pickaxe I dropped and swing it with all my strength at the seam between the wall and the floor. Crack! The rotten shale gives way instantly. Not into a tunnel, but into a gush of pressurized seawater, hitting the cavern floor with a deafening roar. The water is frigid, a shocking contrast to the warm pool. The force of the jet is tremendous, instantly pushing me backward. The men shout in alarm as the frigid water sprays them. The cold stream hits the glowing pool, creating a cloud of hot, dense steam that instantly fills the cavern, obscuring everything. I don't wait. I drop the pickaxe, turn, and plunge headfirst into the new stream of freezing water rushing from the hole. I squeeze into the narrow fissure, letting the current drag me. It's a terrifying, uncontrolled ride through rough, unseen rock. I'm underwater for seconds that feel like minutes, my lungs screaming, my body tumbling. Then the fissure opens up. I break the surface of the water, gasping, coughing, hitting my head on a low ceiling. I'm in a small, cramped side cave. The water level is rapidly rising, pouring in from the cavern behind me. I shine my dim headlamp. This cave is different. It's completely dry above the water line, and the walls are not copper-stained. They're covered in thick, white salt crystals. And there, leaning against the salt-encrusted wall, is a body. It's the surveyor. He's not alive. He's frozen, perfectly preserved by the salt and the cold air. His eyes are open, staring at me. And pinned to his chest by a thin, rusty wire is a small, waterproof data chip. My hand is shaking violently as I pull the chip free. I can hear the two men in the main cavern, their muffled shouts, and the continuing, ominous hum of the antenna as they try to navigate the steam and the rising water. The data chip is heavy, metallic. I look at the surveyor's frozen, staring face. He died here hiding the truth. I look at the salt wall. The entire cave is an air pocket, but the surveyor had been trying to dig his way out. He'd only managed to scratch a few words into the salt with his geological pen. Array is not listening. Array is broadcasting. The current, it's alive. I suddenly understand the terror. The warm, glowing saltwater pool wasn't a scientific anomaly. It was a power source. The antenna wasn't for data collection. It was for transmission. And the coordinates I had, they weren't for the location of the anomaly. They were the frequency. I turn the headlamp toward the end of the cave. The tunnel narrows sharply. I have to go that way. The water is still rising. I hear a terrifying, grinding sound from the main cavern. They're using some kind of cutting tool to enlarge the hole I made. They're coming through. I start to crawl into the narrow, salt-choked tunnel, the water pushing me forward. I reach the point where the tunnel turns vertical. It's an old, narrow ventilation shaft leading up. As I start to climb, I feel something heavy and hard bump against my boot in the rising water. I reach down. It's my pickaxe. The rushing water carried it through the fissure and into this shaft. I climb, the surveyor's chip clutched in my teeth. the cold iron rungs biting into my hands. The salt on the walls is scraping my skin raw. I'm almost to the top when I hear the shouting, much louder now, right below me. They've breached the side cave. I see the glare of their headlamps illuminating the water at the bottom of the shaft. They're climbing. They're right beneath me. I have one shot. I reach down, grab the pickaxe from the water and pull it up to the next rung. I look up, a tiny square patch of light, the top of the shaft, the surface. I look down. The cold one's hand is on the bottom rung. He's less than 10 feet away. I lift the pickaxe, its weight reassuring in my trembling hands. I bring it down, not on his head, but on the iron rung above his head. Crunch! The impact is tremendous. The rung holds, but the rusted bolts holding it into the rock shear off. The rung clatters down the shaft, hitting the cold one's shoulder with a sickening thud. He screams, a sharp, ragged sound of pain. But the rung above that one is now loose, a chain reaction. The whole section of the ladder is compromised. I scramble the remaining feet, pushing on the rotten wood cover. It gives way. I crawl out into the biting night air, gasping, landing on a pile of frozen leaves. I'm at the base of a massive, ancient smokestack, the mine's main vent. I made it. I look down the shaft. I hear furious shouting, followed by the terrifying sound of falling rock and metal. The ladder is collapsing. I stand up, my entire body shaking, the surveyor's chip digging into my palm. I look across the frozen valley of Copper Sink. The town is silent, dark. I realize I'm standing on the coordinates I risked everything for. The frequency, the location, the data. I have it all. I turn the chip over. On its back, etched in tiny letters, is the name of the organization that built the antenna and killed the surveyor, the CIG. It's not a government agency. It's a private, multi-billion-dollar energy consortium, the Concentric Ion Group. This isn't about copper. This is about power. Immense, unimaginable power derived from an underground ocean current. And I just buried their agents in a collapse. I hear the distant, heavy roar of the black surplus truck starting up. It's not coming toward the mine. It's heading away down the dirt road, back toward the highway. Did the men escape, or did the second team on the surface abandon them? I slide down the embankment and start running. The pickaxe and the data chip, my only companions. I have to get out of Copper Sink before the CIG realizes their top agents are buried under half a mountain. But the surveyor's last words echo in my mind. The current, it's alive. I stop and look back at the mine entrance. The black mouth of the shaft is silent, but from somewhere deep within the earth, beneath the ringing silence, I hear a new sound. A single deep chug, like a massive unseen heart beating. The mine isn't dead, it's waking up. I turn and run, plunging back into the black woods, knowing the true danger is not the men I left behind, but the subterranean current they tried to control, and the corporation that will stop at nothing to recover their secret. My survival depends on getting this chip to the light before the CIG finds me. The wind in Blackwood Crossing doesn't just blow, it whispers names. My name is Cassie, and I'm a cleaner at the old Blackwood Sanitarium, a place the town has tried to forget for 40 years. It's midnight and I'm on the 3rd floor, the abandoned wing, where the most troubled patients were kept. I took this job because I needed the cash, and honestly, the silence appeals to me. After living in the noise of the city, the absolute cold quiet of these small towns is almost peaceful. Almost. Tonight, the quiet is a predator. I'm scrubbing dried blood off a linoleum floor in what used to be the main observation room. It's old blood, the color of rust and dried coffee grounds, and it won't budge. I look up at the clock, 12:43 a.m. I have 3 hours left. I hear a sound that makes the hairs on my arms stand up. Not the wind, and not the creak of the old building settling. This is a rhythmic, deliberate tap-tap-tap coming from the wall to my left. It's the wall of room 312, the room they told me never to go into, the room that was sealed shut with plywood planks over 2 decades ago. I freeze, my sponge suspended midair. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. I try to rationalize it. A rodent, a loose pipe. But the rhythm is too measured, too insistent. It feels like Morse code. I creep over to the wall, my heart thudding a frantic counter-rhythm. The wood is cold and solid. I press my ear to the painted surface. Nothing but the sound of my own breathing. Then a new sound, extremely faint, from the room itself. A low, dry singing. A children's nursery rhyme. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posy. I jump back, gasping, dropping the sponge. The singing is so faint it could be a trick of the mind, but the melody is undeniable. And I know, with a sickening certainty, that this floor, this entire wing, has been empty for 40 years. I run out of the observation room, down the narrow, dark corridor, my only light coming from the single, buzzing fluorescent fixture on the far end. I get to my cleaning cart, a pathetic island of safety. I pull out my phone, no signal, of course. I have to call someone. The only phone line is in the caretaker's office on the ground floor, 2 flights down, through the main hall and past the locked entrance. As I turn to leave, I catch a flash of movement in the dust-covered glass of the office door at the end of the hall. A reflection. It's tall, thin, and gone in a blink. I stand absolutely still, straining my eyes against the gloom. My stomach twists. Was it just the light playing tricks? I force myself to take one step toward the door, then another. I reach the glass. I look in. The office is empty. Dust sheets cover the old furniture, but the dust on the floor has been disturbed, not by feet, but by something being dragged. A heavy, wide streak in the thick layer of gray grime leading from the back wall and stopping right at the edge of the glass. I look at the wall. An old, faded portrait of the sanitarium's founder, Dr. Silas Thorne, hangs crookedly. The picture is so large it almost hides the patch of wall behind it. I feel a profound, cold dread. What was dragged across the room, and why did the reflection move? I step back, scanning the corridor. The tap-tap-tap starts again, this time from room 312, louder, demanding. I realize I don't need to break into the sealed room. I need to break into the office. I have to see what was behind that portrait. I take a paper clip from my cart and try to pick the ancient lock on the office door. My hands are shaking too hard. It's useless. I grab the thick, metal scraper I use for dried paint. I slam it against the glass panel in the door. The glass shatters with a loud, ringing crash that echoes through the entire building. I reach through the jagged hole, unlock the door from the inside, and push it open. The smell of dust and stagnant air hits me, but beneath it, a faint scent of salt and vinegar. I run across the room, ignoring the dust streak, and grab the portrait of Dr. Thorne. I tear it off the wall. Behind it, the plaster is freshly disturbed. A roughly cut hole, big enough for a small child, has been punched through the wall. And sticking out of the hole, tucked into the jagged plaster, is a tiny, folded slip of paper. I pull it out. It's brittle and yellowed, clearly very old. It's a drawing crudely sketched in crayon, a stick figure with a huge, smiling face holding a single, large key, and beneath it one word, now. My blood runs cold. The key. It must be the master key for the sanitarium, the one that can open every door, including the heavily bolted entrance and maybe room 312. But who drew this and who put it here? I hear a sound from the main hall, a heavy, scraping sound, like metal against marble, not from below, but from the far end of the third-floor corridor. I look out, the reflection I saw earlier, it's gone, but now in the very middle of the corridor I see it. A perfectly balanced wheelchair. It's old, wooden, and covered in a thick layer of dust. It's not moving, but it's positioned precisely in the center of the hall, blocking the only clear path to the main stairs. and draped over the back of the wheelchair is a long, black stethoscope. The bell of the stethoscope is resting on the seat, facing my office door. It's listening. I look at the hole in the wall, the small size, the childlike drawing, the singing. The salt and vinegar smell. That's what they used on the insane in the 1950s, a crude form of electroshock. I turn back to the hole and crouch down. I lean my head into the gap, shining my phone light in. The space is small, an old ventilation shaft. It leads into the wall of room 312. I can't see the room, but I can see a flash of color in the darkness, a splash of deep blue. I hear the tap 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 start up again, frantic now, right on the other side of the vent. I take a deep breath and whisper into the hole, "I saw the drawing. Do you have the key?" The tapping stops instantly. The silence is deafening. Then a new sound, the dry, rustling sound of paper being pushed through the tiny gap. I reach in and pull it out. Another drawing. This one is hurried, the crayon lines shaky. It's an arrow pointing down toward the floorboards of room 312, and beneath it another word, hurry. I look at the wall. If the key is under the floorboards in that sealed room, I have to go in, but the door is locked from the outside. My eyes fall on the large, ornate skeleton key hanging on a brass hook next to the office door, the master key to the staff wing. I yank it off the hook. I run out of the office and down the corridor, avoiding the listening wheelchair. I get to the massive, bolted door of room 312. The skeleton key won't fit this lock. I need a different tool. I look at my cleaning cart, the scraper I used to break the glass. It's heavy and sharp. I position myself right next to the door. I start using the scraper to chip away at the mortar around the lock plate, digging the metal into the brickwork. Clink, scrape, thud. The noise is terrible. The floorboards of the main hall start creaking, a slow, deliberate, heavy sound, not from the door, from behind me. I turn, my heart in my throat. The wheelchair is moving. Slowly, inch by inch, it's rolling down the corridor toward me. There's no one in it. It's propelled by an unseen force, or perhaps a very slight, intentional incline in the old floor. The stethoscope bell, aimed right at me, is moving closer, closer. I whip back to the lock plate, hammering faster. I have to get this door open before the wheelchair gets to me. I finally pry the metal lock plate free. The heavy wood door swings inward with a groaning screech of dry hinges. The room is tiny. The windows are boarded up from the outside. The blue I saw, it's a child's worn blanket lying on a rusted metal bed frame. The floorboards are old, warped, and covered in years of dust. I can see the area where the dust has been disturbed, a single, square floorboard near the head of the bed. I run to the spot, kneel down, and use the sharp end of the scraper to pry up the board. It comes up with a loud pop. Underneath, in the hollow of the joist, I see it. The key. A massive, antique brass key, exactly like the one in the drawing. The key to the sanitarium's main doors. But next to the key, another object. A small, dry, crumbling human finger bone. I recoil, gagging. This isn't just a former patient. This is something horrific. I grab the key, feeling the cold weight of the brass in my hand. "You found it," a voice whispers, right behind my ear. I spin around. Standing in the doorway, blocking my escape, is a figure. Not the reflection, but a man. He's wearing the same long, gray, antiquated, orderly uniform I saw in old pictures downstairs. His face is pale, his eyes wide and unblinking, his smile unnervingly stretched and serene. "Thank you for helping us, Cassie," he says, his voice dry and scratchy like dragging sandpaper. "We've been waiting for the main key. We need to leave, all of us." Behind him, the wheelchair has stopped, and now, moving from the shadows of the corridor, are dozens of silhouettes. Tall, thin figures wearing similar worn gray uniforms. They are staggering, shuffling, moving with an unnatural, halting gait. The sanitarium isn't empty, it's full, and they've been waiting for the key to be delivered by an outsider, by me. The orderly in the doorway raises his hand, not to attack, but to point. He points toward the bed, at the blue blanket. "But you're not done," he whispers. "We need to know who helped you, the one who sang." I look back at the bed, at the blue blanket. It's not just a blanket, it's covering something. I slowly pull back the blue cloth. There, lying perfectly still, is the source of the singing. Not a child. A very old, small woman wearing a stained white gown, her skin papery thin. She is barely breathing, her eyes closed. She is the one who drew the picture, who tapped the rhythm, who waited 40 years for the key to be found. But I see the wire. A thin, black wire running from under her gown and across the room, disappearing into a crack in the wall. A phone line. She wasn't tapping the wall, she was tapping the phone receiver. She wasn't singing inside, she was singing into the line. The entire sanitarium is a massive, multi-level listening device, and they were communicating with the outside world. I look at the orderly, then at the horde of figures now clogging the corridor. The key in my hand is my ticket out, but it's also the key to their freedom. I have one last question. Who sent me the voicemail about the static? The orderly smiles wider, showing teeth that are too yellow, too sharp. Everyone knows the sound of panic, Cassie. The ones in the walls. They just needed someone to believe it, someone to be a good little cleaner. I realize the truth. The story of the sealed room, the tapping, the singing. It was all a trap, a narrative crafted to lure me to the key. I tighten my grip on the brass key and the metal scraper. I have to fight my way through a corridor full of 40 years of silent, institutionalized insanity. I don't run. I throw the heavy brass key, the ultimate prize, as hard as I can down the opposite end of the dark corridor. It hits the marble floor with a loud, metallic clang. The horde of figures instantly pivots, their shuffling, dry movements rushing toward the sound of the key, away from my door. The orderly hesitates for a microsecond, the price of 40 years of patience. I slam the heavy wooden door shut, throw the master key's old lock from the inside, and jam the metal scraper into the gap. I run back to the hole in the wall, grab the old woman in the blue gown, only leverage, and pull her toward me. As I yank her away from the wall, the thin phone wire connecting her to the outside world snaps, cutting off her song. The silence that follows is terrifying. The horde is now trapped in the corridor, pounding on the door. The sound is immense, deafening. I am trapped in room 312 with a fragile old woman, a dead man's finger bone, and a broken phone line. I look out the barred window. The sky is still black. I have hours before dawn. I have broken the conspiracy, but I've locked myself into the very room they told me was the most dangerous place in the sanitarium. My fight for survival has just begun. Where do I hide? Under the floorboards with the finger bone? Or do I break the window and risk a fall from the third story? The pounding on the door intensifies. They want out, and I am the only thing standing in their way. The air in Silo Creek is thin and perpetually cold, even in late summer. The town is nothing but a collection of grain silos and the rickety, corrugated iron buildings that serve the only industry, drying and storing corn. It's 4 a.m., and I'm hiding in the one place no one would ever look, Silo 4. My name is Marcus. I'm an investigative reporter who drove 800 miles because of a single, untraceable tip. The corn isn't the crop, the silence is. I knew the risk when I started sniffing around the Reese family. The patriarch, old Silas Reese, owns the whole valley. But I didn't realize the silence was protected by violence until 20 minutes ago. I was in the Reese office, photographing ledgers that showed discrepancies between the reported harvest and the actual profit. I got the shot I needed, but as I was leaving, I heard the boots. Heavy, measured, and coming up the stairs. I didn't run to my car. I ran to the only place large enough and dark enough to swallow a man, the silos. I scrambled up the ladder and dropped into the black, echoing interior of Silo 4. I'm standing on the metal grate floor, 300 feet above the concrete base, completely submerged in the thick, dry smell of old corn and dust. The interior of the silo is vast, a suffocating black echo chamber. I can hear the wind whistling through the ventilation fans above, a low, moaning sound. And beneath that, I hear the door creak shut far below. There in the silo building. I killed my headlamp immediately. I need to rely on the faint, ambient moonlight filtering in through the tiny vents near the top. A second sound, closer now. The unmistakable thud of a heavy boot hitting the first rung of the external access ladder outside Silo 4. They know exactly where I am. How I made no noise, I was silent. I crouched down, pulling my jacket tight. I realized my mistake, the air. The silos are pressurized and designed to keep the grain dry. My body heat, my breath. It's creating a subtle, warmer plume of air that's traveling up the vents, alerting them to my presence, even in the dark. I look at the access ladder, a vertical column of shadow that runs from the floor to the top. I hear the relentless, rhythmic clang, clang, clang of metal as someone climbs with a chilling, slow deliberation. I can't outclimb them, I have to drop. I feel for the small, metal emergency hatch in the grate floor where I'm standing. It's meant for inspection and can't be used during a fill cycle, but the silo is empty. I push on the latch. It opens with a dry, metallic squeak. I squeeze through the narrow opening and start descending the internal maintenance ladder, a series of thin, perpendicular rungs that run along the inside wall, right over the empty drop shaft. I climb down maybe 30 feet. The air is dustier here, thicker. The walls are ribbed metal, smooth and cold. The clang, clang, clang from the external ladder stops, right above my head. A voice, deep and gravelly, echoes down the vast cylinder. It's Silas Reese. "We know you're in there, reporter. You came looking for the crop, didn't you? Well, the harvest isn't finished." He's not shouting. He's speaking at a normal volume, but the acoustics of the silo are amplifying his voice into a booming, omniscient presence. "The ledger you took, Marcus, it's bait. It's only half the story. The rest of the data is down here, the real crop." I freeze. The ledger was bait. What was the real crop? I look down the dark, empty shaft, hundreds of feet to the concrete floor. I need light. I risk a flicker of my headlamp, aiming it down. The light beam cuts through the dust motes, hitting the concrete floor far below. And on the floor, in the very center of the base, I see a dark, circular object, a manhole. The silo isn't just for grain. It's a massive, soundproofed access shaft to something underground. I look back up. Silas is starting to move again. I hear the faint thudding of his heavy boots landing on the metal grate above me. He's inside. He's looking down. He knows I'm on the internal ladder. I climb faster, dropping another 20 feet. My hands are sweating, slick on the cold metal. Suddenly, a blinding, intense beam of light cuts through the darkness from above, striking the metal wall right next to me. It's not a headlamp. It's a massive, industrial-grade spotlight. I shield my eyes. The heat from the light is intense. "You're not going down there, Marcus. That's for family." Silas's voice is closer now, vibrating the metal around me. The light beam moves, sweeping across the curved wall. And as it does, I see what I missed in the darkness. Running perpendicular to my ladder, about 50 feet above me, is a massive auger, a giant corkscrew drill used to move the grain. It's retracted, but its motor housing is huge. And near the top of the silo, two smaller figures are now visible, silhouetted against the open hatch. Silas's two sons. They're doing something with the machinery. I hear the heavy, grinding sound of a massive motor engaging. The auger is starting up. It's not meant to move grain now. It's meant to tear apart the inside of the silo. I climb down with desperate speed, the high-pitched whine of the motor growing louder, closer. I have to get below the point of impact. I reach the bottom of the ladder right near the manhole. I look up. The huge metal auger blade is slowly starting to descend, its screw-like arms spinning, creating a terrifying cyclone of air and dust. It's coming right for the bottom of the silo. It's going to obliterate everything here. I smash the handle of my flashlight against the manhole cover. It's a heavy, iron plate bolted down. Clang, clang. The sound is useless against the roar of the auger. I look around desperately. I'm trapped between a sealed hatch and a descending, industrial meat grinder. I see a small, rectangular control box mounted low on the wall, near the floor. It has a single, rusted lever. I run to it, heart hammering against my ribs. I yank the lever down. Nothing. I yank it again, harder. A sudden, powerful jet of compressed air bursts from a small nozzle near the ceiling, aimed not at me, but at the wall. What was that? I see the purpose of the air jet. It's designed to clear blockages. It's a cleaning mechanism, but it didn't clear the manhole. I look up. The auger is maybe 50 feet above me, descending fast, its shadow consuming the space. I look back at the control box. The lever is labeled discharge. Discharge, the silo is empty, unless. I risk my headlamp again, shining it at the wall near the floor. I notice the ribs on the metal wall don't go all the way to the concrete base. There's a 4-foot gap around the bottom, a hidden chute. I hit the lever again. This time, the burst of air is joined by a sudden, heavy spray of dark, viscous oil, jetting out of the wall chute and splashing onto the concrete floor. The oil has been sitting down here for years. The crop wasn't corn, it was oil. Reese was using the silos as camouflaged storage tanks for something far more valuable. The descending auger is 30 feet above me. I have seconds. I notice the oil jet isn't hitting the concrete. It's hitting the manhole cover. I realize the oil is a hydraulic fluid. The discharge lever is for the pressure seal around the manhole. I hold the lever down. Oil streams out, hissing and bubbling around the edges of the manhole. The bolts holding the cover down are straining, covered in the slick black fluid. He's trying to open the well, shut down the motor. Silas's voice screams, no longer calm but panicked. But it's too late. The massive engine for the auger is roaring, and his sons can't stop it immediately. The auger blade is 20 feet above me. I hear a sharp, metallic snap from the manhole cover. The pressure is too much. I rip the lever back and dive onto the cover. I grab the heavy, oil-slicked edge and heave. The manhole cover explodes outward with a loud K-chunk, hitting the silo wall. I drop into the gaping black hole. I fall 5 feet, landing on a cold, narrow ladder inside a vertical concrete shaft, the manhole cover crashing shut above me. The auger, it descends with a final, massive, bone-jarring crash onto the concrete floor of the silo, right where I was standing. The metal shriek is deafening, shaking the very earth. I'm alive but plunged into a new, terrifying darkness. The air here is cold and still, smelling strongly of ozone and damp rock. I shine my headlamp down. The shaft continues deep, deep into the earth. It is lined with thick, poured concrete. It's a perfectly engineered vault. I start climbing down. The ladder is solid, but the rungs are slippery with condensation. I descend for a full 2 minutes. I can no longer hear the auger or Silas's voice. I'm completely alone. I reach the bottom of the shaft and step onto a wide, cool floor. The shaft opens up into a large, rectangular bunker, a high-tech, reinforced vault. The room is filled with towering stacks of wooden crates. They're military surplus, stenciled with faded, bureaucratic markings. Not oil, something else. I walk to the nearest stack. I pry open the lid of the top crate with a piece of rebar I found on the floor. Inside, nestled in styrofoam and lined with foil, is not a financial ledger and not some kind of weapon. It is hundreds of neatly stacked, individually wrapped vaccine vials. My mind reels. A massive, illicit supply of a highly restricted, high-demand pharmaceutical. This wasn't corporate fraud. It was black market biopiracy. The crop was life-saving medicine, hidden from the world and sold for exorbitant prices. The silence was the price of keeping this secret buried. Suddenly, a loud, sharp click sounds from the far end of the vault. I spin around, shining my light. A massive steel door, the vault's main entry, has just slammed shut. And standing in front of the door, holding a remote switch, is Sela's Reese's wife, Mary. Not the son's, not Sela's. The quiet woman who managed the books. The one I never even considered. She's wearing a coat over a nightgown, her gray hair messy, but her eyes are hard and sharp. "The ledger you took, Marcus. It was for me," she says, her voice quiet but ringing in the vault. "My family was cutting me out. That vault is my retirement, and now you're the last deposit." She wasn't on the outside trying to find me. She was already down here. She had been waiting for the auger to clear the silo and for me to fall into her trap. She points the remote at a massive steel pipe running along the ceiling. "The silo has an automatic disinfectant cycle, reporter. You were right to hide in the shaft, but this vault, it doesn't need air to run its cycle." I hear a loud, heavy hiss from the ceiling pipe. I look up. The pipe is covered in small brass nozzles. "It keeps the vault sterilized," Mary says, her voice dry. "And you're about to be the cleanest thing in Silo Creek." A thick, yellowish-green gas begins to fill the vault, hissing from the nozzles. It has a sharp, burning smell that stings my lungs instantly. I drop the lid on the vaccine crate and turn to run, desperately scanning the walls for another way out. I see it, a small, dark access port, low on the wall near the floor labeled airflow. I realize the disinfectant cycle is controlled by the airflow system. If I can block it, I can buy time. I grab the piece of rebar and run to the port. The gas is thick now, making my vision swim. My chest burns. I smash the rebar into the metal casing of the port. The metal bends and shrieks. Mary is laughing now, a dry, rattling sound. "You can't stop it, Marcus. This is the weight of the harvest." I pull the rebar out, fighting the urge to cough. I look at the crate of vaccine vials. My final move, I have to create a blockage, a deadly one. I grab a handful of the glass vaccine vials, worth thousands, and throw them as hard as I can at the airflow port. Smash! The fragile glass shatters, spraying the thick, precious liquid into the dark port. The gas starts to sputter, the hissing slowing. The disinfectant liquid has clogged the airflow system. I gasp a huge, lung-burning breath of air. The flow is slowing, but the gas is already everywhere. I look at Mary. She is retreating, covering her face with a heavy scarf, heading toward a small, inner door built into the wall of the vault. Her personal escape route. I am trapped, poisoned, but I am alive, and I have the rebar. I run after her, knowing that if I let her escape, the story dies with me in the gas. She reaches the small door, fumbling for the lock. "It's over, Mary. You can't leave the evidence." I choke out, my voice raw. She spins around, a small, silver Derringer pistol appearing instantly in her hand. "The evidence is just a reporter who broke into a private vault, Marcus, and now you're going to suffer the consequences." She fires. The small pop of the gun is deafening in the enclosed space. I hear the bullet zing past my ear, embedding itself in the steel wall behind me. I throw the rebar, spinning it like a spear, aiming not at her, but at the control panel next to the inner door. Clang! The rebar hits the panel with a powerful spark. The entire vault instantly plunges into darkness. I hear a shout, followed by the clatter of the small pistol hitting the concrete floor. I'm blind, disoriented, choked by the gas, but I'm running. I know where that airlock is. I just need to find the tiny door in the dark. I stumble forward, my hands sweeping the cold, hard crates. The weight of the harvest, the entire secret, is pressing down on me. I find the inner door. My hands search for the handle. And I hear Mary's ragged breathing right next to me. She's also searching. We are both poisoned, trapped in a pitch-black vault, struggling for a single exit. The danger is absolute, and the final fight is about to begin. I lunge, swinging blindly with my fist, hopping to find her. The silence, broken only by our desperate, ragged breathing, is the most terrifying sound of all.